Yeah. All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jason Aspel, Deputy Executive Officer with the Engineering and Permitting Division here at South Coast AQMD. Going to hit on some housekeeping remarks before we jump into our meeting. So thank you for participating in our hybrid meeting for South Coast AQMD Permit Streamlining Task Force Subcommittee. We have three formats for participation: in-person, Zoom app, and teleconference. Please silence your communication devices to prevent disruptions during the meeting. In-person attendees must not connect to Zoom or teleconference while in the meeting room. All participants on Zoom, except for subcommittee members and South Coast AQMD staff, will be placed on mute by the host. You will not be able to mute or unmute your line manually. After each agenda item, public comment will be taken. For those of you in the room, you will be called when it is your turn to speak. For those on Zoom, if you would like to make a public comment on the Zoom screen, please click the raise hand button. For those calling in by phone, you can dial *9 to signal that you would like to comment. Your name or part of your phone number will be called when it is your turn to comment, and the host will unmute your line automatically. We will do our best to have, open dialogue. We will not start with time limits on comments, but if we are moving on in time in the meeting and it becomes necessary, speakers may be limited to a total of 3 minutes on all the items on the agenda and 3 minutes or less for public comment. And the chair may provide a shorter time depending on the number of requests to speak received to allow everyone opportunity to be heard. If that is the case, a countdown timer will be displayed on the screen for each public comment. Please note you can hang up and leave the Zoom meeting at any time. Please treat others with courtesy, civility, and respect. Failure to do so can result in your mic being muted or you being dropped from the meeting. Lastly, please be aware that this video conference is being recorded by participating in this meeting hosted by South Coast AQMD, and you agree to authorize recording of audio and visual content presented during this live event and consent to subsequent use of the recording in the public domain by South Coast AQMD. For those of you joining us in person, the facilities are located by the lobby down the hall. And if there is an evacuation, we do have exits at the rear of the room, and please just follow staff orderly out to the parking lot. So that concludes the housekeeping remarks. We'll bring the meeting to order. And if we can do a roll call.
Bill Lamar, absent. Bill Pierce, absent. Bill Quinn.
I'm here.
Present. David Rothbart.
Here.
Judy York.
In
Absent.
transit.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you again for everyone showing up in person. Those of us who are joining online. Want to note we do have other task force members in transit. We do want to mention we do have what will be a packed agenda. So we will be getting through the presentations and just ask questions, comments after the presentations, and then we'll discuss them in full. So I think we will jump right in to the presentations. Touching on the agenda, we have first item will be a brief item on a permitting advisory we just released to ensure there's communication out to the public and everyone understands how permitting processes work and how you can streamline with this specific topic we'll be talking about. Then we'll be doing our general permitting update, very briefly touching on current statistics and workflows we're seeing in the permitting division. And then we'll have in-depth conversation on our certified permitting professional program. We've been discussing this a lot over the course of our permitting enhancement program. We're discussing a lot of the feedback we have been receiving and how what we're looking at for that program. Then also we'll be touching on, we have a discussion item with a brief presentation to introduce it, but generated by our task force member. And then we'll close it out without any other businesses or any other business in a public comment period. So we will jump right in. I'll hand it over to Senior Engineering Manager, George Illis.
Thank you, Jason. Good morning. I'm George Illis, Engineering Manager for the General Commercial Team. We handle all applications related to gasoline dispensing facilities, also known as GDFs, and I have a brief presentation on a permitting advisory. AB, or I should say California Senate Bill 445, requires that by December 31st, 2025, any underground storage tank systems with single-walled components be permanently closed or upgraded with compliant double-walled components. The program is implemented by the State Water Resources Control Board and enforced locally by the Certified Unified Program Agencies, also known as CUPAs, which are typically city or county fire departments. There are approximately 100 facilities in our jurisdiction that need to meet the requirements by the deadline, for which South Coast AQMD permits are required prior to modifications. We had issued a permitting advisory for these GDFs, and essentially it's a streamlined approach, and it's administrative change applications. Qualifying GDFs are those with a like-for-like replacement with identical tank configurations, no changes to other components except dispenser replacement without change in type, location, or number of fueling positions, and no change to throughput limits. The advisory was released June 25th, 2025, and we committed to acting by December 31st on complete applications submitted for admin change under this scope by August 1st. So applications submitted by August 1st for this scope, we're committing to, that are complete applications, we're committing to processing them by December 31st. Applications received after August 1st will be processed in order of receipt and may not be completed by the December 31st deadline. As with all applications, expedited permit processing is available, and applicants who are interested in that should request such upon application submittal and use the form 400 XPP. The filing fee for expedited requests is 50% additional, as described in Rule 301. Requests that are beyond the scope of this admin change will require a separate application and may take longer to process. So if time is of the essence, an admin app is a good approach to get the requirements that are needed under this, State Water Resource Control Board deadline. Other requests can be handled under a separate application. We currently have 44 applications with requests for equipment modification related to single-walled components. There's a QR code there that can be used to navigate to the permitting advisory or the link, which will open up the link to the advisory. And that concludes my presentation.
All right. Thank you very much, George. Appreciate it. So yeah, we have been in contact with the water board on this item. It is not our requirement, but we are impacted by the water board requirements, and just wanted to get word out there because we understand that facilities may have waited, and there may be some urgency on their end to get permits. So going to open it up for public. Well, let me ask our task force members if we have any discussion.
I'll ask a silly question. As far as the water board requirements, do the facilities have to make the modification by the end of the year? And if so, is there going to be a challenge as far as allowing them to do the work if the permit's not issued?
That is why we wanted to get an advisory out there. This has been out there for really 10 years.
2014.
Yeah, 2014.
2014.
So it is the last stragglers on it. But I believe the drop dead date is December 31st.
Yep.
So we wanted to signal of get in now.
Be proactive.
Yes.
After after, the latter half of the year, I think that's when we're advising facilities, keep the permit application requests simple and to the point. We're obviously very aware of this. So, we'll do our best to get to those, but trying to signal it now.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other task force member comments on this?
Yeah, I have a question, Bill Quinn.
Yes, hi, Bill.
Hi, how you doing? So who would enforce this? Is it the water board if the tanks have not been replaced? And would that mean that the facility would have to shut down?
That is our understanding. Yes, it's a state water board requirement, and our understanding it is they do not operate. What the water board does not have insight into is how many facilities are actually planning to replace their tanks, or those that are just planning to shut down.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I did want to ask you before we open it up to public comment, do you have any attendees at your
I do
remote
not.
location? Okay, thank you very much. All right, seeing no other task force members with their hands raised, do we have any comments in the room or online for the public on this item? All right. Seeing none, I think we can move forward with our general permitting update. All right. So we're currently under our permitting enhancement program. We're continuing to look at workflows and workloads in the division. Continues to be movement around the division. Want to make everyone aware of some recent reorganization we have done in, I'd say, the last month or so. But just going through, we have promoted a new manager to our aerospace printing and plating team. Snei Kim is with us. She is fulfilling the position side by side with Mitch Heimoff, who is still with us until late September. So we're doing succession planning with that team. Also, our reclaim admin operations have moved under David Hauk, and also some movement on the back side. David Ono will now be overseeing our backed team. We are developing a new permitting support team. We'll be working on filling those positions over the course of the next few months. Permitting related operations, but more of a support role, modeling items such as those requirements during the permitting process. Also on this org chart, oil and gas has moved over to Shannon Lee. And then lastly, George Ellis over our operations team will be, Perry Entertainment will be moving there. For those that have become familiar with our special projects team over the past couple of years under PEP, Permitting Enhancement Program, that special projects team is now going to be dedicated to the operations under George. And that team is also taking on smaller spray booths. This is a high volume processing team. So they are going to be provided additional resources to get this work done and to get permits reviewed faster. That's the intent. And then in terms of a special projects team, as we bridge the gap from the pandemic times, it was a very useful tool to have it take on extra permitting duties from the other teams. Over the last year or so, we've been bolstering our staffing, getting them trained. And this was always the intent of the special projects team, is eventually become part of a full permit processing team. So it's a good sign that we're at a point where we can move it into a permanent team. So moving on, quick recruitment update. mentioned the pandemic times, our peak vacancy rate was over 20%. As part of PEP, we prioritized staffing, and we had a target vacancy rate of 10%. Doesn't mean we can't go beyond that, but that was at 10.2% in March 2025. That was primarily due to regular retirements. We had a recruitment for new engineers going at the time. We timed it nicely, and now we're down to 8.0 division-wide vacancy rate. Other than 2 supervising engineer spots, which are vacant due to promotion, which we have a recruitment to fill right now, we have filled every engineering position in the division currently. We're at 100%. The only vacancies we have are some admin and specialist non-engineering staff. So not much more we can do to fill our engineering positions there. Touching on our dashboard statuses, we have our public-facing dashboard, which indicates if permit applications are awaiting district action, or if we need information from a facility. And generally, if everything has been addressed, we consider in process to be a good thing. There's nothing hindering moving forward with the application. Say over time, we've definitely been making progress, keeping it in the in process, which is a good thing, keeping both sides aware if there's any outstanding items. We don't have the numbers up there, but currently the awaiting facility action is 17.3%. Awaiting AQMD action is 18.25. Looking back in the 2020 timeframe, that was 28% on the facility action side and 19.7% on the district side. So incremental progress. Still be nice to have more granular data from our dashboard, which we are working on behind the scenes, but this is still proving to be a very useful tool when we use it. All right, looking at productivity in the division, things have been going very well in terms of production. Still have a long way to go. We still have some long-term things we're figuring out and adjusting according to the data. But we have been meeting the goals we've been setting along the way. We met our timely completion goals in each of the 4 quarters. And then the big one is we set out to increase our production, our permitting actions by over 500 completions, which is a 10% increase in production as compared to what we did in calendar year 2023. So we hit that and then some. So things are happening. We are seeing the progress. Again, still work to do on that front. It is not an endpoint for us. As we go through all of this, we have been doing a monthly report to our stationary source committee, which I'll be touching on some of the charts we present there in that report. But we have been presenting the in and out, the workflows of our system. I think historically we had always shown a static inventory number, and we're trying to get more information out to show how it's a dynamic program. And then again, continuing to work on staff development. I want to thank some facilities out there who have hosted us for training programs. And again, we're trying to attack what's left over of our aged applications and still keep up and improve production across the board. Okay, so touching on our dashboard statistics again, historically this has been a chart we showed the task force. I think task force members have expressed this data is very helpful to understand what's happening with permit applications in process. For just a quick explanation, the number in parentheses are what we deem aged applications. And then the total inventory of permit applications is the other number not inside the parentheses. So I think we've been seeing some trends over time. Source test review, we've been working with that division to get things moving. Historically, we have seen an improvement in those numbers over the past couple of years as they've been dropping. You still see on the left side additional information requests, which is a common as we work through permit applications, as we ask for a facility as provide more information. But the one we have highlighted in red, which we've always discussed, is basically the review period of permit applications. I'll say for overall review, we have dropped, I believe recently it was 14 to 13%. We've got that down to 11, which I'll discuss in the next slide. And then for our aged applications, we're at 18%. But let me jump into the next slide to get into more detail on this. So as we've been working through improving production, our permit production, getting staff trained, obviously the easier apps, the new applications, the low-hanging fruit, as we like to call it, tend to go through first. We see our marine source program, we have much more production. But what has happened is, over time, we still have the aged applications that we need to get to. What we've done to make sure those don't sit over the past year, we have had 2 focused initiatives to get those out the door. So some of you on the applicant side may have heard staff communicating this. We have a month or 2-month effort to try and get these aged ones out the door. We have also worked on a Title V work plan to get aged Title V renewals. Facilities can continue to operate while they wait for their Title V renewal, but it is something we're working towards to address and get those out the door, because they are a lot of work, because it's essentially reviewing the whole Title V permit and every piece of equipment there. So moving back to our supervisor manager review, what we've seen is the increase in 5% for aged applications. What we likely see this being caused by is those initiatives as staff hunkered down and processed aged renewals. So that means we have to go through the supervisor manager review. So again, we're keeping a close eye on this. I will say the impacts are limited to 2 of our permitting teams. The other 5, we're actually seeing great improvement in this review step. And those 5 permitting teams, it's down to 7% for all applications, and then 12 for the aged ones. So this is fresh data. We've just had the aged application initiatives. We're analyzing this data, and I'll mention later, we're going to be developing work plan and to address some of these issues, and again, analyze staffing as well. So this is the chart you see in our monthly stationary source report. This has been a tracking of our production during the PEP period. Each data point on this line represents an average of the past 12 months of data. So when you see a dot, it is a sustained production rate. So this is how we were able to hit the number. And you can tell over the past year, we've been hovering around that 500 or 489 per month is what translated to that goal, the increase of permit applications. So this has been a success, but again, this was one step along the way, and we're going to continue to look at production, but then also getting to other permit applications that are aged. This is the workflow that I mentioned, where we track and report our incoming applications and outgoing applications. This is for the July report period, which means this is the June end of fiscal year data. So had a very good month in June. Had a lot of applications coming in at 519, but also had them going out. in the red awaiting action, that does include permit applications that we have acted on and issued permits to construct, where we are awaiting facilities to go through the construction and source testing compliance determination steps before we finalize the permit application file. You will see on the right, there's a summary of all of this. And again, this is in the report each month. We just wanted to introduce it here if there was any discussion that the task force wished to bring up on this table. Moving forward, what we are going to start doing is dissecting our bins a little bit more in terms of where our applications are. Historically, we have been focused on the total inventory number, which really has not given as much insight into where our applications are, what type of applications, and what we're dealing with. This is just the first indicator, the first breakdown of what we're going to be doing. But the same chart before for the June data, this is broken down by our minor source permitting program and Title V. As you can tell, a lot more of our volume comes from minor sources, and we're able to push out those smaller ones a lot and a lot heavier volume. The Title V program does have more requirements. You're dealing with more facilities, and they're also triggering more requirements as we go through, our evaluation processes, more to evaluate there. Less coming in and proportional on going out, but just wanted to provide the numbers here to see the breakdown. And so in terms of next steps, just want to indicate again, we're seeing the improvement in production. It's stabilized. We are seeing increased numbers. We're trying to move forward from the historical approach of just looking at trying to get the total number down. What we found was staff focused on the low-hanging fruit to get higher numbers out the door, but more difficult applications were not prioritized appropriately. So, as said, we looked at our two aged application initiatives. What we're in the midst of doing wasn't quite ready for prime time for this meeting, but we're looking at detailed reporting bins, even more detailed than the one I just presented, and then breaking those down by age. And then to make sure staff has the proper direction, we are going to be developing a work plan to address those different bins appropriately. When I talk about bins and what those are, Title V renewals, ERCs, equipment awaiting permits to construct, those that have already received permits to construct, those that may have been built without a permit first. I will give an indicator. What we are seeing right now is over half of our aged application workload right now is projects that have proceeded without a permit to construct. Those tend to be the more complex, difficult ones if they've proceeded without the evaluation process. So again, we're looking at these. We will be coming back to these, this task force to continue to present this information. But a lot of information there. Want to open it up for task force comment?
We had Mr. Quinn first.
Okay, Bill?
Thank you. So I noticed on your previous slide, there's a column there or category for EPA. And I'm wondering what you can share with us on how EPA has been acting. I mean, I know that EPA overall has had many cuts. So are you feeling this? Are you seeing any differences from the production that's coming out of EPA on your permits?
I don't think we've seen any changes in production. I think they are under some restrictions, I think that everyone is aware of. In terms of workload, we've seen pretty good turnover of them getting back to us, responding to our requests for expediting reviews where appropriate. And then I think the other backstop we have with this program, if they, and this has always been the case, if they don't comment within 45 days, we are able to move on permit issuance. So we do always have that, but I think things are still moving along with EPA.
Thank you.
Thank you. David Rothbard.
Thank you. Great to see progress on the backlog, seeing
Yep.
more permits being processed than coming in. So that's good. The backlog's going down. But I have a question on slide 12 where you say in progress, in process, I mean, that's a fairly large number. And can you explain kind of what in process is? I assume someone's not sitting there working on the permit. It's assigned to someone. I'm trying to figure out what that percentage is doing
Yes.
with staff.
Yes, and as I indicated, it is going to be much more helpful. We are working on software and workflows in the background of all of this, is getting that granular data, but it would be assigned to an engineer to work on, whether it's being actively worked on or worked on the next week. We may not have that insight into it, but essentially is not waiting any identified hurdle to continue processing it is the level of our granularity right now.
Got it. And kind of similar thought process when we look at kind of how things are going along. I appreciate your graph on slide 34 showing your at your goal, but the question I had, you kind of alluded to it, is how long is it taking to get a permit? It's great to see you're completing the application,
Absolutely.
but what's that relate to time?
Yeah.
Because you're saying something that I've observed is like people have to build projects and people are proceeding without a permit. So it's taking a long, long time. Some people have no choice but to just take the risk and build a project. So I'm just curious about, is there a way to track the metric of how long it's taking, and is that acceptable or not?
We have been looking into that. It is very difficult, I think, with the data we have. What we've been using as an indicator is our, I say, lower fee schedule, just to see if there's improvements there. And we have been seeing, that we're improving on that. It's very difficult with the, I'll say, snapshot type data analysis we have right now, to kind of see that, dynamic improvements. So there are signs of it. I would say those applications that are aged continue to be aged, and it requires specific focus. I think a lot of what we're seeing in some of the teams, it's for new projects that don't necessarily fit neatly within our rules. It's a lot of policy decisions back and forth with the companies on how to get this permitted, what it is and is not eligible for on emission offsets. So it is still, there's some challenges there, and it's being deliberate in getting to those aged applications. But again, it's going back to this one. We are seeing very good flow on our minor sources. A little bit more on the Title V.
Understood. And last quick one, Bill brought up a good caveat of EPA, and it triggered my memory. We've talked in the past about what you have to do to appease EPA when they audit you. I'm just curious, are you seeing any difference in the feedback you're getting from EPA as far as them being sticklers versus them being a little bit more flexible these days? Is there any hint in their view today versus maybe a couple of years ago?
I will be diplomatic about this and say I think things are flowing very good right now with what EPA staff is working through right now. So I'll say currently we don't have any issues.
Got it. Good to hear.
And we do regularly, still interact with them on meetings to discuss items. Thank you. Thank you for your comment. Judy York, please go ahead.
I think what would help me to understand is what is your expectation at this point for how long, people come to us and they go, well, I want to permit just a regular IC engine or boiler that all fits within I'm going to say normal parameters of permitting. what is your expectation of how long should it take, at least to be processed in South Coast? Put EPA to the side, whether it's a minor source or a Title V facility, and you could give two different numbers, but what's your expectation of timing for a regular kind of source? How long should it take at this point?
And for the, I mean, well, let's start at the basics is we're always aiming for the regulatory 180 days or less.
Sure.
I think in some of what you've seen in the build out of certain teams is for the high volume applications, the gas stations, the engines, we're building out that team to get that lower. I think, 6 months for someone permitting a gas station, Schedule A lower fee, may seem like an eternity on the applicant side. And we've heard it. And so, we are trying to be.
Say a boiler replacement, they're getting an old boiler out, a new boiler in. Do you at this point expect that to be less than 180 days or at
Yes, so,
100?
well, let's just say a new facility, new boiler. That's very simple.
Yeah,
You added caveats to that of now it's being changed,
Yeah.
a change out and why. It's the buildup of I think all of permitting is built on emissions accounting
yeah,
and where a facility is at. So I
Okay.
think the easiest things we have is very new businesses that are under emission thresholds. That's simple. I would say few months and looking at staff, to get
Yeah.
out. As you get into Title V and you got more equipment, I always advise reaching out,
right.
to get that indicator, and then we give feedback
Right.
as well. But yeah.
So you're indicating a lot of the hangup still is essentially credits, or how are we handling the existing baseline? What's the NSR baseline
Yes.
versus the new? That's still our biggest time.
I think it's
Is that right?
it's one of them, and I want to directly answer
Yeah,
your
yeah.
question. It is a wide spectrum, but this is part of what we're working on right now with this work plan, because we all feel that the key indicator is the turnaround time.
Right,
It is just very hard with this volume to do snapshots to try and get what's going in, coming out. So we are trying to get this data, because I think ultimately it's, that what we're seeing, and I think we'll touch on it probably in the last item as well. And this isn't all, I'm not saying that. I'll say sometimes it's getting through the review process. Our engineers are loading a lot on our senior engineers and getting it through. And we're still in learning or training mode, and that back and forth that happens there.
right.
Some of the things I've personally been involved with is, or see, because they get up to my level, is we get through permitting, but then it's, everything that's triggered, and then the facility is adjusting the change order, so to speak.
Right,
And then it goes back to the, I don't want to say square one, but it's reevaluating at those new levels.
so it's reevaluating all the other sources that they have and what their NSR balance is to then get through the NSR permitting, not just the unit by itself. That's
Yes.
straightforward. Okay, that
Which often we have a database. It should be accurate.
should be,
Yes.
is the
Yes.
yeah.
Oh,
Gotcha.
and also, the layers of new rules. So like
Right.
17.1 has made us, kind of stop and take stock of like, wait,
Right.
who's in, who's out, what does it mean to be
Right.
in, major source, looking at the different,
Right.
like PTE definitions of
Right.
all the different regs. So, all those layers get added. And I think the other
Yeah.
part too is, for a long time, because of our staffing, we were so shorthanded, we did end up in a hole. And some teams have dug out of the hole faster, and some teams are
Right.
still working through. So that's where, when you're asking what is the norm, what should we expect? I think we're still wrestling with what is the norm, what is the new normal,
Right.
and then how do we get it better? So, there are a lot of for each team, we meet with them monthly of like, okay, what are you going through? What are your high priority projects? What are you doing to streamline? Do you have any ideas? And so that is what we're doing in just moving it along, trying to get that. So, you're seeing some of those benefits at the same time as we're working through what we have, without.
Not everything was fixed all at once. It's like a excavation, we're finding new stuff as we go, and then we're reacting to it. And that's what we're in the middle of right now, with moving towards new reporting bins and not simply, here's a number and, some people are waiting, some people are not. I don't think that's, productive to get us where we need to be. But thank you. Yeah, these are all very good questions.
Good discussion. It triggered my memory of years ago. We brought up the backlog, decade or more ago. The response we heard after the fact was just have staff put in more hours and more work and you get the backlog down. Sounds like you're beyond that. You're like, okay, we need to look at things a little differently. And I was hoping maybe this group could dive into is like, okay, what else can we do to simplify the process? On the question about EPA, or is there anything in the process that makes simpler policies so when you're writing a permit, it's more standardized, easier, streamlined? And Jillian brought up something that's kind of one of my things on the back of my head is the rules. You get a rule that comes through, it's very, very complicated. And it's like, oh yeah, I can have another 100, 200, 300 permits to process. Maybe that's something we take on of what rules need to be maybe opened and simplified, not to relax the requirements, but make them simpler. It'd be nice to do it the first time, but we have lots of rules, probably too many. But is that something that we could bring back to say, hey, we should probably look at this rule and find out this is causing a lot of backlog. If we do a couple little minor things, it'll get the permits issued faster. You get emission reductions. It's a win-win. Just bringing it up, is that something that would be helpful to try to brainstorm, or do you have a handle on it?
No, I think so. And I think we have, internally a short list of rules that we identified for improvement. I think as we're moving forward and like kind of excavation and digging out stuff, there's definitely some very complex rules. We're diving through 1469. Again, small universe, a lot of work.
Right.
But again, high toxicity with those operations. That's very important, but it's sifting through that and streamlining and getting attention now. But no, absolutely. Apologies, you brought up something at the front end, but I forgot what it was. Yes, I think it was getting back to, it is not just a big number and trying to aimlessly, cut it by some number. It's let's find where the problem on a couple guidance documents for a couple of long-term items, but just haven't been addressed over the years in terms of that are related to emission offsets, eligibility, but then also how they accumulate. So those are in the pipe. We're trying to get those out because we see that these facilities hit that wall where it becomes complicated. So it's identifying those type of issues.
I'm gonna bring up something that I think we touched on before, and it's been sort of cogitating in my mind for a while, and that is with the issues associated with offsets and reclaim sunsetting and a new EPA administration. Has anybody else been thinking about or talking about approaching SIP approval of our mobile source credit rules that are sitting on the books in reclaim and elsewhere?
I'll say, I think it lands with our planning team. I think it is
Yeah.
something that has been
Have people been?
discussed.
Okay, so, and
Yes.
what do they say? Or, because that seems to me the biggest way we can move forward, both with our stationary source offset requirements, reclaim sunsetting, and getting more electric vehicles on the road.
I think
You
there
know,
was
yeah,
challenges that were brought up.
Yeah.
And so there's still discussions.
Yeah.
Challenges by whom? I mean, I'm very aware of the requirements, an EPA laid them out a long time ago. But
Yeah, it's something that the planning and rules division has been discussing
right,
with EPA if it's
Right.
possible. So I think, yeah, I
I
think Maricopa has a
that's right. That's
So
right.
it's
They're
examining that and
they're working on something, yeah. But it seems like even if we said, hey, we're gonna make mobile source credits available to our public agencies, public sources that are well controlled, regulated, why would we not look for that opportunity?
Look forward to your comment in the next
Okay.
reclaim working group meeting.
I'm just reading that
Or
right
NSR
out.
reclaim working group. No, but I do appreciate.
I would like to
Yeah.
put that on the table and keep the discussion
Yes.
going. I
Absolutely, yes.
understand the naughtiness of it, that's difficult. These are regulatory knots, but at the same time, they were proposed and put on the books 30 years ago.
Yeah,
Maybe it's something now that time has come.
and you'll hear
Back,
in
I'll
stationary, we're doing the NSR equivalency report, but it is
Yeah.
a balance of you can't just put new exemptions into NSR. There is a ripple effect and some very
Right.
big consequences if that analysis is not done and you drain
Right.
the offset accounts that are eligible for those exemptions. So listen to my Friday presentation
Okay.
in the stationary
Okay.
source, but it is,
Okay.
no, it is something because
Yeah.
we're dealing with, these exemptions that have been around for a while.
And maybe it's time for a fresh look at that and a fresh, reorientation of how that can be constructed so that we can move forward on the stationary source side and reduce emissions substantially in the basin.
I'll give one, I think, because it's been publicly discussed. I think one of the industries we're dealing with is composting.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. We're dealing with that too. It's very
yeah,
complicated.
and the offsets again for
Yeah.
as operations get larger,
Yeah,
offsets required for those under
Right.
current rules.
right. And 80% of our emissions are mobile sources. So, we all know this. So if we can't leverage the emissions of mobile sources, we're just hamstringing ourselves.
Yes. Thank you very much for
Okay.
that comment.
Yeah.
Sorry, I gotta go to my screen. I believe I'm hearing
Quinn.
Bill Quinn is.
Yeah, thank you. So I wanted to follow up on that. CB's had quite a bit of conversation with Mike Kraus and Susan about this concept of using mobile source credits for NSR purposes. And yes, you're right. Somebody mentioned Maricopa County in Arizona. EPA did give, this is my understanding, EPA did give partial approval. Unfortunately, some of the requirements that they've put on Maricopa County are going to make it really difficult. You have to monitor the mobile sources after the credits are issued. And nobody's done that before. And so, normally once you get a credit, it's good. And in this situation, they've put on some measures that are going to be very, very difficult. A couple other things. So when the state was going forward with advanced clean fleets, it looked like there would be very, very, very little left to go after mobile source credits. But with that program all shifting now, and whatever your views are on that, from a mobile source generation focus, it does open up the door for some greater possibility because the surplus question now is much easier to achieve. So I can tell you that there is quite a bit of interest in doing this. It's an uphill battle. I'll make one more comment. The person at EPA who really understood mobile source credits for the last 30 years, this is a good thing and a bad thing. The good thing is she knew a lot. She also was very challenging to work with on these. She has retired. So that's like I say, a good thing and a bad thing. The good thing is uh, there's not an obstacle there. The bad thing is there's nobody up there that has knowledge on this at this point. And so we'd really be starting from ground zero to move forward on a mobile source program. But yes, those conversations are in works, and SEMA's been having them with senior management for quite a few months. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that insight, Bill. Really appreciate your observations and conversations and SEB's involvement in that. So thank you.
One
Yes,
quick
go ahead.
As far as kind of efficiency and what might be able to be done, has there been any thought as far as looking at simple permits, like emergency generators, boiler, whatever you say is simple, and have a special team set up? Here's a group that just specializes in just turning around things that are simple and just thinking out of the box. Is that something that would help things out rather than going to the silos we have now?
So we do have a team that works on certified equipment. What we're working on, and I think it's the high volume team, for gas stations, engines, is it's building that out. We're also working on things, again, not ready for prime time, but hope to present to the board in October on some of the workflows we've been doing. Because what we're aiming towards is really streamlining and making those a lot simpler. Because I think what we were saying, 600 to 700 applications
PDFs
is that a per month?
for you.
Per year, okay. Per year. So yeah, hundreds per year of streamlining, and then of course, the intent is that staff now has more bandwidth to do other things.
Good to hear.
So yeah, it's in development. Software takes a bit, but we've been making good progress. Thank you. All right, I'm going to open it up for public comment. Thank you for waiting during the task force discussion. First up is Casey Corliss. Go ahead, Casey.
Hello. I'd like to thank the AQMD for working to improve the permit issuance process. We definitely encourage that. I just want to point out that regarding this slide for the Title V permitting flow, I'd just like to point out that it could be a little misleading. I believe someone could look at that with the around 1,000 workable permits and 125 awaiting pre-screening and the 110 outgoing apps per month and think that they could potentially get the permit processed in 10 to 11 months. And so I just need to mention that that is not our experience. So there's a certain fraction of those workable permits that are in like a very slow turnover box because we have around 38 permits that are more than a year old. So I just feel I need to point that out. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Casey. Again, each application is different. You do have some that go through quicker than others. And again, this is actually right hitting on the head. What we're looking at for our reporting bins is those that are not, especially in this breakdown of minor source and Title V, and those that are becoming aged, and then trying to prevent them from becoming aged. So thank you, Casey. Next up is Rita Loof. Go ahead, Rita.
Good morning, Rita Loof, Director of Environmental Affairs for RadTech International. And I just wanted to echo David Rothbard's comments regarding the policy analysis and the impact on policy on the permit applications process. And that's very important. I'm glad you are looking at it. 1469 was mentioned, and I wanted to give you an example on 1469 because there was just a public consultation meeting recently, and we did submit public comments on that because part of that process is going to involve applicants submitting plan applications. I'm assuming they're going to go through your department, Jason. So that is going to be an additional workload on the permit processing department. Therefore, it might take resources away from the backlog reduction process. And the suggestion that we have made in our situation is for facilities that are doing chrome plating that are phasing out their hexavalent chrome-based operations, going to coatings processes like ours, UV, EV, LED processes that do not contain chrome, that those facilities be given some flexibility as far as the level of compliance that they have to ensure, because they're moving away from a hex chrome base process into a totally different coatings process that does not involve hexavalent chrome. But then because they have to enter into a phase out plan process and submit plans to the district, that could really be problematic in slowing down the system. So I hope that's on your radar screen as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. We've been involved in that very closely. I just want to add that this rulemaking is in response to a CARB rulemaking action for the air toxics control measure for the same industry. We're statutorily, required to implement that. So it is, being handled through the 1469 process. I think this is probably minimal compared to the rest of the 1469 workload and phase outs. It is some workload that is coming on us. I think a lot of it's being handled with notifications for the phase outs. I think one of the benefits of transitioning, at least under our risk or new source review for toxics, is it's a huge risk reduction if facilities moving away from hex chrome. So we do have that built in for our rules. But thank you for that. Appreciate it. We haven't seen too much of facilities that are transitioning yet, but those deadlines are approaching, and there have been multiple advisories, working group meetings coming up. So encourage continued participation with those processes to alert us to anything. But thank you. Next up, Scott Weaver. Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Scott.
All right, super. Scott Weaver, Ramble. Thanks for the presentation this morning, Jason. I really wanted to jump on the remarks that were made by Judy and Bill and on the broader concern around the availability of emissions offsets. And just say, and it's probably beyond the scope of this particular task force, but something for us all to be thinking about. In the original EPA new source review design, air quality improvement was intended to be driven by NSR actions, and the offsets were key to that. And so the tests that EPA came up with around, real, surplus, credible, and all that, were really key to that design intent. But, fast forward to 2025, today in South Coast and in California, I'd say more generally, air quality improvement is not being driven by NSR at all. Rather, our BARC rulemaking is, the key to driving those air quality improvements that we're looking for. And, the availability or not of NSR offsets has really just become an impediment to advancing that clean air strategy. So, again, I would encourage the district to be really exploring opportunities, even with this EPA, to modernize NSR to reflect the reality that we're in today and what the clean air strategy needs to look like so that the mechanics of NSR aren't the obstacle. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Scott. Yeah, I think message is heard loud and clear agency-wide on this one. Those efforts will continue. Thank you. Next up, Allison Torres. Go ahead, Allison.
Good morning. I'm Allison Torres with Clean Water SoCal. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Okay.
So I want to thank you for the process update. It's really helpful, and I appreciate all the efforts tackled so far. I think that the focus on looking at the overall processing timeline is really important. So it's encouraging to hear that there's a plan to work towards looking at the more granular analysis of bottlenecks and process areas to focus streamlining efforts. So that's really encouraging. But I did want to pass along that I do continue to get feedback from our water and wastewater members that processing for their permits is still very long. For example, there's some where they've had applications in the queue with still that in-process action, but haven't received any drafts or anything like that for 18 months or so. So it does sound like there have been some progress and focus on age applications, which is great. But hopefully, this continued work will shorten these timelines as new applications come in. I also wanted to just agree with the comments raised by Judy about the expectations for that processing time. I think it's really important for the end users waiting for their permits, especially as public agencies are planning timelines for projects. The goal of 180 days is great, but it's often not the norm for our sector. And so as trends are identified, communicating what the new expected timelines for different equipment categories, I think will be really helpful for the permitted community. Also, the comments about identifying the different hangups, such as there were some comments about NSR issues, rule implementation. So I really think that that's worth exploring more so that those areas can be focused on for solutions for efficiency. So thank you for allowing me to comment.
Thank you very much. And yeah, I wanted to add, as we're in public comment, is the team that your membership is talking about continues to be a focus. We've tried measures, we want to see if they worked. There's still challenges there. So it is a continued effort for that team. So thank you. And we'll continue, appreciate your input on all of that. All right, want to keep things moving along for our next item. Jillian Wong will be presenting an update on where we are at with our certified permitting professional program.
Good morning. So in the interest of time, I am going to skip through some of the slides. You all have them. So a bit of a background, this really was part of the chair's PEP initiative for us to look at strategies and especially the CPP program where we heard, it really isn't working as intended. So in terms of progress, we did tee up the conversation at our last task force meeting in December. And we gave an update to the governing board where we did touch on CPP and then a working group discussion in April. So today we're here to give you an update, kind of a summary of what we had heard in terms of feedback, and then some ideas that we had heard and we came up with that we think will address that to get your feedback. So the first thing we heard is the manual is outdated. We agreed. From 2011, no updates. Yes, it is outdated. We also heard that it really should align with the CPP exam, help me prepare for that exam, help me know what I have to look for. So what we are going to do, and we actually have started it, is we have started looking at updates to the manual. We're going to reformat the chapters, put the information in a way that is easier for everybody to understand, to use, make it a useful tool for everyone. The plan is to release draft chapters for review at future meetings, perhaps permitting working group meetings, where we can roll out and for discussion and feedback as to, is this what you're looking for? Maybe the first few will be lengthier, and then as we get settled in on the format, those could go a lot faster and maybe more focused on the technical aspects of each. We will identify update frequency. So some chapters might need to be updated more frequently than others, depending on, once again, if it's like a HRA, if 1401 gets amended, maybe we have to amend that. So, having somebody or having a set schedule that we are going to look at them. So we don't lapse for, 14 years before we get another update. Okay. And then the CPP exam prep will be a chapter we add. So the next thing that we heard is the lack of feedback to CPPs on their submittals. As a CPP, if I submit something, I don't know what I did right, I don't know what I did wrong, how am I going to ever improve? And that is something we're like, okay, and then also there is no difference in time, whether I'm a CPP submitting it as a CPP or not. So there is no incentive for me to even want to submit as a CPP. So one of the things we're thinking about is perhaps developing a separate workflow for a CPP application, where maybe it's a cursory review from an engineer to make sure the main points are met, go straight to senior review. So it doesn't sit in another queue before it gets to a senior review. A pre-application focused meeting. Currently, if you come in and ask for a pre-application meeting, we sit down, we talk in generalities, right? Because we don't have specifics. For a CPP should know what we need to process that application. So maybe it is a checklist of like, come in with these, give this to us a week or two before the meeting, let us actually think about it so that when we do have that pre-application meeting, it is more meaningful. We can actually dive into where we think the shortcomings might be, what might trip up this piece of equipment in terms of getting a permit, identify those early so that the CPP can help the client or the applicant address those before the application comes in, and then we smooth it out that way. And then that goes into the checklist. So it really is a checklist of criteria. What do we expect a CPP application to include? And that way it allows us to then go through that same checklist to say, okay, you met this, did not meet this, why not? Here is where it was deficient. So it is a more formal approach to providing that feedback. And then finally, and then once we get all these tools, we understand, we'll look for a way to put that into the CPP manual, maybe as chapters, maybe appendices, whatever makes the most sense. Resources and tools. Once again, lack of checklists, lack of access to like policies, procedures, and information, approved emission factors. That is something that we are working on as part of the transparency aspect of PEP. So we are looking at, as you heard from Jason, it is developing those policies and procedures as we run into those bottlenecks. As the permits are being processed right now, we start to see, hey, this issue is coming up a lot. This needs a policy, let's address it, have a path forward, set it very clearly, criteria, so then there is transparency and, for everybody involved, for both the permitting engineers and for the regulated community. You know what you're up against when you come in. So we are going to work on pre-application checklists, expectations. We do want to integrate that into the CPP manual. And once again, just like the manual itself, the thought is that we will roll out draft information, draft checklists to the permitting working group meeting where we can have more meaningful discussion before we finalize on something. Many of these documents and the manual itself, it's going to be a living document, continuously being improved upon, but we have to start somewhere. And then finally, CPP listing and, the visibility, that is something that we're looking into and actually ties into the next topic of different levels of CPP. So for example, now, when you think about a PE, you come in, you first start as like an EIT before you get the experience under you, and then you become that full-fledged PE. Maybe that is something, a CPP plus, so multi-level. Maybe someone coming in, and that might make the exam easier to pass. You come in, you come in as entry level. Okay, great. You have fundamentals. Now start submitting applications. We provide you with feedback of whether, where you are. And then that helps you to a point that now, and then the requirements of what is CPP plus. So that all has to be worked out. But this is kind of the foundation of the idea of where we're going, looking at that PE certification, maybe continuing education classes, instead of having to take, right now the CPP, you take the exam once and you're done, you're in, but then there is a continuing education aspect, especially since our rules get updated. So are you up to date? There was also a thought of, should we base this on equipment types? So a specialization, just like the PE, and so we're kicking around some of these ideas, but we wanted to bring that forward for everyone to think about and provide us with that feedback. And then finally, when we get to a point, we do want to start maybe with a pilot program, because ultimately this is staff resources, this is cost, and there has to be a cost recovery component to it. So we do want to get a handle of what this means. And then to you, do you see the benefit? So from there, we can look into the level of effort on our part and what is needed, the benefits that you see, and then setting that cost for fee recovery. And then finally, I think one of the things that, we identified is a lot of times when we embark on improving something, there are a lot of great suggestions, but ultimately, if we don't have kind of guiding principles, we might end up all over the place and not really accomplishing what we want to accomplish. So as a reminder, we're really looking to improve our permitting efficiency, right? Enhance the effectiveness of the program and increase participation. So as we come up with these ideas, as we shore up the ideas, what we want to do is to be able to fit them into each of these bins to say, okay, how many of these goals does it hit? And that will help us prioritize some of these ideas and what we move forward with, when we move forward with those. And that is it for the presentation.
All right. Thank you very much for moving through that quickly. I'll open it up for a task force discussion.
That sounds great. Thank you.
All right, next.
I'm sure it's going to be more difficult, easier said than done. But I think it's a great goal, and I think it's fantastic. I'll think more, but
yeah. Well, initially, I want to thank you for all your input as we've looked at this. It's a lot of work, but again, I think the key is at the end point. It's going to be beneficial for
I
everybody.
think it'll really help.
Yeah. So, David,
I had a question. Jillian, you brought up fee recovery.
Yes.
I think we talked about this last time as far as, at least my concept here is, if you allow a pathway for a permit to be issued much, much faster, then industry, whoever needs the permit, is going to pay a premium for that. Is that kind of the concept you're looking at fee recovery, or is it more of, hey, if you want to be a CPP, you have to pay more? I'm just curious which direction you're going in as far as how a fee would be implemented to make sure it's not going to have unintended consequences.
It's going to be a little bit of both. I think we do recognize that, right? Because right now, if you look at how the fees are set, they're based on staff time processing the application. And so that is going to be part of the pilot program where we, maybe it's a category of equipment or something where we say, okay, we're going to take this through the pilot program. Now let's track how long does it actually take? What time savings do we see? And then maybe there is a different fee schedule for a CPP plus application, knowing that, okay, there is cost on the applicant, obviously, to use a CPP and have them prepare the application, but knowing they'll get it faster and that the fee that they're going to pay us is less. So we're looking at all of those aspects when we talk about the fee recovery.
Just making sure it's not like the expedited process where hadn't really expedited things that much. You just want to make sure it actually is going to yield some benefit for applications.
Yeah, we are going to have to track it very closely because, again, the other side of it is, okay, it's the expectation, I think, that Allison was talking about earlier is, what is this really going to get me? What are the results? And then, over time how is that trending with the resources? The basics is it working? Again, adjusting if it is not, well, recognizing and then adjusting. So I think lots of things as we dive into this and try and develop it. Thank you.
One other quick one, Jillian brought up as far as policy documents, which is great for CPP. In general, it would be great that everyone has something to look at saying, okay, for this emission factor, for this, whatever you're working on for an application, you go write the document. So the permit engineer and the applicant have the same document to look at. And a lot of times in the past, it's been sort of an interpretation or a concern, and it just spun the wheels. We didn't get anywhere fast. So having something that's posted, and maybe there needs to be a clear repository for this. And right now, where a lot of documents are on the website, you kind of have to know the website really well to find it. So I don't know if that would be something that would be good to have on a permitting portion of the website, of resources and policies, just something thinking out loud. If everyone knows what to look at, it makes it clear for everybody.
Absolutely. And that is something that we're looking at. It's not only, making them available, but also combing through all the old ones that we have and, looking to see what is still relevant, trying to group them together. If something did supersede something else, let's be more deliberate in saying that this is superseded. Yes, it no longer is in effect. So that is part of the cleanup that we're doing with our policies. We're looking at, new ones. We're looking at if we need to write new ones to kind of group everything together to say, this is what we know of historically what is out there. Here is how, the implementation should happen. Here is how it should be. So yes, a lot of that is in parallel with everything that we're doing, permit processing. We're also looking at opportunities for us to start tackling some of these policies, pull them all together, make them available. And then, ultimately, when we get to either the CPP manual, the permit processing handbook chapters, that's where really, and that's what we're looking for, is a way to put all the information so it is easy for somebody to find it. Because like you said, it's there if you know where to look. But even if you looked, it's a listing, and it, depending on how the titles are entered, you might not even find what you're looking for. So how do we make this more accessible to everybody? You're right, not just the CPPs, but also to the general public, regulated community, and anyone else who wants to find them.
And just another thought is, if you have some change, maybe there should be a sign-up list of, hey, new policy document, something's changed, so people are like, oh, let me go look at it.
And we actually implement that under, so we do have a distribution of, any external policies, we do announce it.
Great.
So that was part of, we had no communication mechanism for those interested specifically in permitting matters. And that's what we developed it. And for those that are online, if you haven't already, please sign up for the general permitting list. A little plug there.
Did think of one additional thing to add to your mix of things to think about and try to sort out. And that is the one sticking point, and this comes from our staff does a lot of permitting. The one thing we don't have great visibility into and becomes a sticking point is the NSR balance at a facility. Just like we talked about earlier, we can do the application. We know what the equipment we're dealing with and so forth, but it's going to hit that internal snag of, well, there are all these other sources inside, at the facility already permitted. We don't always have the right kind of visibility to help solve the offset issue. So maybe just think about the tools that a CPP would need to review that. We have we can submit a letter and we can get some visibility into things, but sometimes it's a little more exchange of information that we need a little more readily so we can help solve how do we, deal with that. And just want to put that out there to think about as a
thank you.
element.
Absolutely. I totally understand that. For those that are not,
It's a little down in the weeds.
it's very weedy, but also very important to understand as it can complicate the permitting process. I'll touch a little bit on it in the next item in terms of NSR balance. I think we saw that for 317.1, where we put it public facing because we knew that was going to be one of the issues and very important data for facilities to know where they were at in their permitting.
Right. Sometimes we just end up pulling many engineering evaluations and you go through all the data, look, so yeah.
So absolutely. Bill Quinn, go ahead.
Great, thank you. So I'm all for the CPP program. And I don't want to make this sound like a negative comment, but as I look at this, it looks like it's a huge investment, and I know you guys are slammed. So I guess what I want to hear from you, all of you, is, do you think this program's really going to pay off? I mean, is it going to be a success? And I like the idea of a pilot, but I just feel like you need to do some checks here because this is an awful lot of work and you don't have a lot of extra staff time. I mean, I see that and I understand it. So I'm repeating myself, I'm all for the program, but there needs to be a check to make sure this is a program that's going to be used. And the bottom line is it's going to result in a shorter time period to get your permits. So I guess if you could just respond to that and if you understand my concern.
Yeah, we do, because that is what we look at. in terms of resource allocation, permitting versus doing this. But yes, I think this program is worthwhile. I think it can work. And that's why for what we're doing, we're starting to think now pilot program, maybe we do equipment category. We are looking at some streamlining and improvements. I think Jason touched on a workflow. Maybe we start small. Maybe we start small with one equipment category. We can roll that out. We see how well it goes. And then to your point, Bill, let's see if it actually does. And we'll keep an eye on all the metrics, staff time, processing time, how much has it helped? And then with that information, then we can look at it to see if it really does pay dividend. And maybe there are aspects of the program we can use, not the whole rolled out, the whole thing that we're envisioning, but that's where I think the value is of like, let's try it. Let's not give up on it. We'll try it small, and then let's get the data.
Let me just finish by saying, so I've talked to my members and a lot of them are very skeptical, but Judy, I really turn to you because I know you do more permitting than almost anybody here. And so can you share with us, do you think that this program really could be successful?
I think it can be. I think it can be a win-win. Right now, we see a lot of people just pour money into the XPP, in the hope that they'll get an expedited permit, but it doesn't really work much of the time. And it should really help if, someone is doing the legwork instead of the district permit engineers. It really should help. It really should.
Yeah. Thank you.
Again, it's done right, but I think
it's done right. It should.
Yeah, it's dipping our toes into it. I'll say everything that was presented here, if we were to take this all in one big bite, we would not be able to do it with the resources we have. And, we'll be discussing this with the board, as well as we move along. But, there is potential. I think the very first thing is it's the communication with the feedback. That's one. To try and communicate with whoever's submitting these applications. The other thing is more immediate. I wanted to mention we are using the contractors that we have under PEP. We are utilizing those to help build out this program, the manual. So we're already using those resources, not internal resources, to help us out with all of this. But it is going to be small steps. And again, if it's not working, we're not saying we're going to just keep carrying this through blindly. We do not want to do something that is not going to result in, more timely permit issuances just for the sake of doing it. This is a voluntary measure under Health and Safety Code. We're looking into it, first round of it, probably wouldn't say it's successful. Let's look, again, most of the feedback we've gotten is, can we revisit this and build it up again? So thank you. Thank you, Bill. Completely understand the hesitancy. I have also, other feedback that hasn't, or that was discussed in, last meetings is, we talk about bottlenecks and everything that just impact them more. I think it was David that, brought that up, or make it more of a bottleneck. Let's be strategic about it. Start small. Don't overload your pre-existing bottleneck. We have, I mentioned the 5 other permitting teams that things are moving along. Maybe you start, there. But it's, this, I'll call it a partnership with CPPs,
right,
to make it work.
I don't need this up anymore, but as much as the whole community of regulated and those who are submitting permit applications, no one understand the requirements, that just helps the permit engineers, right? Every time a permit engineer has to spend time explaining to someone why, this, that, or the other is difficult, it's frustrating, it's demoralizing at some point, I'm sure. So just the more people are educated and understand, and when they get to the permit engineer, there's an understanding of what's needed, it just really helps. So that alone is super helpful. And that alone is why you need to sort of publish up-to-date information of what is required for a permit, because it's too confusing for, most people to understand how do we get to this complicated thing.
Thank you very much, Task Force. Want to open it up to other attendees, if there's any public comments in the room or online. I see lost my screen here, 2 hands raised. First up is Anna Yuter from MWD. Anna, go ahead.
Hi, yes, this is Anna Yider from MWD, and I just kind of wanted to echo what David Rothbart and Judy were saying about how this could make having the standard information available could really make things move faster. Because in my personal case, I can think of several examples where a lot of the time going back and forth that like took time for like the permit processing was because we're discussing emission factors, trying to like negotiate things. But if there was a like standardized document published ahead of time, then I could have looked at that and kind of determined where, like, what limits we'd run into for risk and kind of have a lot of that already worked out so that by the time we got to the permit submission and finalizing that with the engineer, there basically wouldn't be a whole lot of back and forth. We'd just be like some details, but it wouldn't be like months researching something. So I think, like Judy said, it could make a significant difference.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that comment. Next up, Joe Hauer. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, it took me a second to get unmuted there. I want to generally agree, certainly with what Judy and a lot of other folks said. I do think this is a worthwhile effort. I think there could be a lot of benefits to doing that. And I think that if there is a process where a well-crafted CPP application actually does get through faster and maybe at best bypasses the first level of engineering review, that could make a huge difference both to the district's resources and to the overall time to get the permit application. Speaking to some of the earlier issues, there was a discussion in an earlier section about having clear and enforceable permit conditions. And I certainly also want to say I agree with that. We had a situation not long ago where the permit said that the pH of a scrubber shall be monitored and reported, and there was nothing in the permit that suggested that a continuous monitor was required, but the district ultimately issued an NOV for failure to have a continuous monitor when it wasn't actually required overtly in the permit. So we really, everyone benefits from clear, unambiguous permit conditions. So that's what I have.
Thank you very much, Joe. Be hitting some of that in the next item. All right, stay tuned. Next up is Kurt Coleman. Go ahead, Kurt.
It's still morning. Good morning, everyone. Kurt Coleman, Southern California Air Quality Alliance. I just want to express our appreciation for the work that's been done. We do agree with the comments from David and Judy, and we're so glad to have them on the task force because of the experience they bring and the knowledge they have of the permitting process and the problems. I would like to follow up maybe or seek some follow-up with what you are planning in terms of your response to David on that, the issue of having a team work on simple permits. I was thinking that something like an express lane concept for simple applications might be a good idea, but I'm interested to see what the staff has in mind in terms of trying to deal with getting the simpler permits out the door quicker, because that's one of the comments that our members have. Obviously, on a major project where there's CEQA involved and everything else, you're at the mercy of having a lot of information be provided outside of the other agencies or waiting work done by other agencies. But as Judy said, just a simple boiler or a emergency generator should not take 18 months. So anyway, we look forward to working with you through this process, and we're encouraged by the developments that have come along since the institution of the PEP. Thanks.
Thank you, Kurt. And for reiterating that. I mean, we'll look into the Express Lane team. We do have some sub teams that are built out for it, but we can actually look at maybe just at a minimum evaluate potential criteria of new facility, minimal numbers of, or equipment already permitted, low NSR balance, simple equipment. We can, at a minimum, actually just take that back and see if it's something that can fit into existing structure, what we built out. All right. I do not see any more hands raised for this item, so we will move on in our program, and we'll go to our last item. We'll try and move through this, but this is a little bit different, but it's our task force member discussion. I want to thank David Rothbart for bringing this up. We've been working through various discussion items to talk back and forth. This one we'll handle a little bit differently. I think we'll let David introduce the topic. We put a few slides together just to kind of build a foundation for everyone to understand, permit conditions and what compliance assurance means. But I'll hand it over to David quickly, then I'll jump into some slides, and then we'll have the discussion. But
thanks, Jason.
You can reference your original question on the screen if needed.
So I appreciate you teeing it up for me. This is something our members had come back based on experience doing permitting, that sometimes you'll get a draft permit with certain conditions, and you're like, well, why do I need to do this monitoring or documentation? And what's the basis for this? The rule doesn't say that. And sometimes we'll get feedback saying, well, it's for compliance assurance. And it seems something that's very vague. It's not definitive. And like the folks I represent in the wastewater side, it's a very unique process. The people who operate are very familiar with it. But when you submit an application and say, here's all the documentation for biotrickling filter, for example, you brought that up as far as a pH. Well, the manufacturer may say, well, here's a recommended pH, but it has nothing to do with the performance of the emission control. It's just what the manufacturer recommends. So it's just one of those things as far as what do you need for air emissions, and is that really for compliance assurance? And it's just this gray area that tends to complicate permits. And what I've seen is where you have a more and more complicated permit, when you're operating a facility and you say, oh, I need to change out this piece of equipment. It's not air emitting, it's a pump or something. And you replace it out because it's specified in the permit. Now I have to revise the permit, give you an application. Now you have a bunch more applications to process. So it's just more of what do we need? How can we clarify it? What do we really mean by compliance assurance? And it can be clearer to the applicant of what would be expected, so it's not as much haggling during the permitting process. Yeah. So that's kind of where we're coming from.
Okay, great. And I'll go through the slides, and we'll continue to discuss. I think you're mentioning pumps and things like that. It's probably an equipment description, maybe a conversation we can have in another meeting. We'll focus on the questions here. In terms of, you mentioned the word policy. I would say we have a policy per se in terms of authority. Where it comes from is our rule 204 for those that aren't familiar with it. I won't dive into every word here, but it basically gives the authority to impose written conditions, again, to assure compliance. We don't often do this, I say rarely, but we can also add conditions upon annual renewal. For those that are in the Title V program, those are all handled under Reg 30 for that program. So I'll keep moving on here. But I think at the core of the program is ultimately what we're doing is staff is calculating emissions and health risks and trying to determine compliance with the rules we have at those emission levels for the proposed project. And then staff develops the permit conditions with the intent that those conditions will ensure compliance and emission limits with the operation of the equipment, again, as proposed, and then for the life of the permit, make sure it's being operated properly. I think you mentioned, pH is a proper operation or directly affecting emissions, probably two different things to discuss there. But this can come in the form of maybe a periodic measurement of actual emissions, but more often than not, it is some sort of operating parameter that's indicative of proper operation or making sure airflows are going to the proper place at the right rate. But what we're aiming for is proactive measures to prevent violations, proper operation, then also checkpoints for inspectors to make sure those are both being adhered to. This has been touched on. I won't go too far into it, but clear and specific. We don't want, if you have ambiguity in there anywhere, it can lead to misunderstandings between the facility inspectors. So try and get that clear language in there. In terms of what we actually look for, we list, temperature and pressure as examples. Those are common ones. You'll see why, for those of you wondering why you always see pressure measurements or temperature measurements. Pressure correlates a lot to airflow and resistance. So we're doing air quality permitting. So when you look at static pressure, that indicates suction, where is going. Differential pressures for all of you that have air pollution control equipment, you see the changes, if anything, is seeing resistance in the airflow to make sure that can be addressed or staying within proper range. Temperatures, we have selective catalytic reduction, in a lot of facilities use to reduce NOx. That has to be in particular temperature ranges. For some sources we permit, temperature actually correlates to emissions. We talked about plating. That's one of them where there is a correlation. So you'll see limits for temperature, or at least monitoring and recording it. And then comes along with that, is it being done accurately? Is it being calibrated? But then also the frequency is important to put in there, not to leave it unsaid. So it's kind of walking through the permitting process as an operator in the discussion. But for very basic equipment, this will be straightforward. Spray booth, I think what we see, probably why there's no specific policy, is that you get into your more complex facilities, more complex equipment, you'll see changes in the technology being used and how they monitor what the opportunities are to measure airflow. So you get into maybe some case by case from company to company, but with the same core engineering approach. So, and then something that comes up in meetings we have with facilities, some may think it's emission limit is something that is just needs to be met one time during a source test. That is a demonstration, but it actually applies all the time. And I think that's where these periodic measurements, at least I'll say that half of them are aimed at is air getting to the air pollution control system properly? Is that being operated? Is it being clogged? Does it need change out or some other maintenance? Yeah, we have SEMS. It is not feasible to put a SEMS on every single piece of equipment to monitor it continuously. So that's the aim for periodic monitoring to make sure everything's being worked or is working appropriately, and then you can act on it if it's not. So we'll dive into some of what I've been indicating earlier, but you know, David, you mentioned that, some of these are not in the rules. Some of them, maybe they are, maybe they're not. Some of them are in backed, but they really don't get into the site by site considerations. And flexibility is required for a lot of the standardized conditions we may have. We recognize that. And then oftentimes the parametric, the operating parameters are developed from the source test itself. Is you do a measurement, how's it operating? You take those metrics and plug it into the permit. And then the thinking behind that is there's some assurance of you do your source test once a year, some cases once every 5 years. Is this a lot of time to cover to make sure the equipment is still operating at those same emission levels using those parameters. But ultimately, we want it to be practically enforceable, not something wild that the facility can't do or an inspector can't check, make it clear again. But some of the thinking going behind it is, are you dealing with a source that has wide variability? Things are changing a lot. Maybe you need to do it more frequently for those. We deal a lot with fuel blending is, what are those being fed into and where are they being combusted? Are we just looking at a worst case scenario? The type of contaminants. Are you dealing with gaseous particulate, and how they're getting to the proper control and how that's being operated? And then honestly, is there a large margin of compliance between what maybe a rule limit is less needed because you really have a large margin of compliance and you will never feasibly, at your worst case scenario, hit those limits. So lastly, what I do want to touch on, and this is we've been talking about NSR balances, offsets. Thank you for setting the stage for this. But we see it a lot on the back end of permitting. But I've been coining it as an avoidance of thresholds, basically, is a lot of permitting is an accounting procedure of emissions, is you build up and then you hit new requirements as your new source review account gets bigger and you have to provide maybe emission offsets or you're triggering backed. I've listed a few things here, but that is where staff goes through their evaluation and comes back to the applicant and said, here's what's needed. Here's the offsets you'll need to purchase. And at that point, it's facilities. Well, okay, maybe we don't need that emission level. Maybe we can back it up a little bit. But what that is then it's not just flipping the switch and saying, okay, that's fine. It's walking it back and then redoing the evaluation at that point. But again, this is all facility by facility. And you'll see as facilities make different decisions in their permitting journey, so to speak, that's where you'll see differences in permit conditions. And while you'll see deviations from standardized approaches is, I listed some, examples here of why you'll see daily emission limits on some, maybe rolling annual limits on others. A lot of them are, depending on the basis of what a facility may be triggering or what they want to avoid. And then behind that is, well, how are you going to prove it up and make sure you're still not, triggering those provisions over time? And so the inspector can check that you haven't gone over. So again, wanted to just provide some foundation there. These documents are just resources. It's not anything advocated, but I was looking through for the task force, the public, just to see more discussion on these items. Provided a couple links here if somebody really wanted to dive into the weeds on some of the thinking behind conditions and how they're developed to assure compliance and make them enforceable. So you can peruse those at your leisure. And thank you for bringing up the topic. Want to open it up for task force discussion. That's what it's meant to be.
You go first. Go ahead. You brought it. You
All right,
brought the
all right.
issue. So you go
So
first.
appreciate the discussion explanation. I still look at this as it's a nebulous subject. It's case by case. And I've seen certain situations where, the permit engineer has a concern and wants information, but it's a curiosity more than emission related. So there's that gray area of what do you really need for what purpose? Is it, well, I'm interested in this versus this is a critical parameter to make sure you don't exceed your permit limit. And that's kind of my concern of, are we providing policy guidance to the permit engineer saying, you don't need to go that far? And the other element that comes up is because we all want permits quickly. Sometimes people just take a permit condition. It's like, I just need my permit. I'm not going to argue about it. And the next person comes along and sees a condition. It's like, where'd this come from? So, other people are accepting this and it's harder to explain why this is problematic when someone else has accepted the permit. So there's a lot of that going on. I've seen this, because it's a nebulous subject, become more problematic and slowing the process down. Because, for the operators, I need to go and get more and more data. And what does it mean? Is it really useful? Is it really checking the box for what the permit engineer is intending to do to make sure there's no exceedances? Again, it's a gray area. So I wanted to bring it up to say, is there any guardrails on it to make sure we just don't get stuck in a rut of, we have a concern, how are we addressing the concern versus is it a real problem?
No, I do appreciate the discussion. I think they're, in discussing it with staff, we don't want these to become research projects. They are not. I would say, there's those two main components. Is the equipment being operated correctly in the future? Is it, are the emissions being held at that standard? Say if you deviate from there, you mentioned pH. It's, is there recommended pH? Again, if you were to go against, what the manufacturer is recommending, what does that do to that filter?
That's a very specific example that one of my facilities had that very specific condition, and it was hampering operations. And we had to go improve it and go say, we need this changed because it won't operate properly, regardless of what the manufacturer said. And when you dig into it, the manufacturer is not saying for air pollution control purposes, it's from some other purpose. They want a pH range. So that's an example of, we get too specific about a piece of equipment, then we have unintended consequences. And in that case, it took a lot of time and effort to change a permit over something that didn't relate to air emissions.
No, appreciate that. I mean, we'll look into it. I know I've had other conversations with dimensions, or what does require dimensions, because it actually correlates to air emissions versus something that may not, because it's a description of a piece of equipment. Yeah. So it goes, both ways with, certain parameters, but did you?
I did.
Oh.
I put it down just so. And I recall my pH problem that took 2 years to solve. Similar, permit engineer had set the pH level so high, it just destroyed the scrubber. But anyways, okay. I would suggest there are a couple of things. First of all, it was super helpful when Title V came in. It started requiring that the regulatory requirement be specified with a permit condition, and that was helpful.
Yes.
Do we do that now with minor sources? I think of, I think we don't, and I think that would be helpful. I guess why not? Why would we not put on the permit what regulatory requirement is this from? It should be, stated there. And so just a practical thing that would make it easier for everyone to understand, why am I doing this? And then it would get right down. Now, always the default is, if the permit engineer doesn't know, it's always Reg 13. Okay. So the conditions are Reg 13, a lot of them, but then you dig in, you go to the engineering evaluation from 20 years ago, and it would be, 1401 or something else. And then, to address an issue that has sprung up from that. But anyways, it is helpful to know what requirement is this from. And it sort of also helps keep the permit engineers grounded in, what am I specifying here? What am I seeking compliance with? And that is super helpful. But the other issue I'm going to put out there again is, maybe it would be super helpful to everyone if we push back on US EPA a bit again. For the first 20 years of Title V, we could say, or, the district would put a permit condition, you must comply with Rule 109. You must comply with 1110.2. Those rules are laboriously written, right? We spent 2 or 3 years writing a rule, workshopped, and then suddenly a permit engineer is supposed to take that 30-page rule and condense it into 10 sentences or something in a permit condition. And that, to me, is where the most problems occur. It's hugely problematic. And what is wrong with referring to the whole of the rule? EPA's issue is, well, the applicant might not know what they need to do, but it has created way more problems than anything else. And the example I would put forth is permit engineer did not know what to put for Rule 109 in one case that I was working on. And they simply put both the daily record keeping requirement and the monthly option of record keeping on the permit. So then suddenly this, facility's got to do both instead of just one, because you can't take a big rule and put it into a permit condition. So I would suggest let's go back to EPA and say this is not a good idea. And it would simplify what permit engineers have to do every day.
Thank you for that. I'll dissect this a little bit. You mentioned pH. I would say the one thing that comes to mind, and I'm not saying this was the reason, is a lot. I mentioned the parameters during source testing. Did the pH come from a source test, and is that where it came from?
No, it wasn't on the water.
Okay.
The scrubber water itself. The pH on the scrubber water itself.
Okay, but was that the parameter during source testing?
No, not at all. Not at all. It was, they had to keep it above 10.5.
Okay.
pH of 10.5, if I remember. And it was just disastrous for the equipment.
Okay. Yeah, I would say in that where it is damaging equipment, I'd say
Yeah.
definitely reach out and elevate at that point. I understand it's in the
I'm
past.
laughing to myself because it was a while ago. It took 2 years to solve, and that person has retired, so.
Okay. Moving on from that.
Yeah.
But no, thank you for the example.
But to me, the origin of most of the compliance condition problems now are all related to trying to put a long rule requirement into a permit condition.
Yes.
It's just hugely problematic.
No, yeah, I want to hit on that. One on the tagging. Actually, I think that is a very good practice on the minor source.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not any standardized, but I like that idea because I think a lot of what we communicate when we talk to the engineers is don't put a condition in there unless you know why it's going in there.
Right.
On an understanding basis.
Right.
So I think, but one step further is tag it. I think it still, brings forth, what you call the nebulous of 204 and what's needed on the case by case. But I think it's standard practice of thinking of what
Right.
rule am I implementing. On EPA, I will say, I think I've been very persistent of asking, is there anything we can do to streamline this process?
Yes.
I will continue, we will continue to do so. Like I said, we meet with them regularly. I'll say there's hope that we can. I think in the past, for those that aren't aware, we had a 2016 EPA audit. What identified one of the items is we should not have high level permit conditions, as it should dive into the specifics of the rule language and draw out all the requirements. If there's an option, the option should be specified, so it's all laid out in the Title V permit.
But we had 20 years before that,
Yes.
when it was okay.
So that started getting implemented after that audit. And so it is, yes, a lot of work. We do get comments periodically of it is not, then, recent months that's not specific enough. But I do think, we brought it up in the past. It's an option, again, within reason. You don't want to be too nebulous on the requirement. But it is something we do ask them periodically. Is there opportunity that you see for streamlining? Maybe it turns into, a request. See where it goes. So, but yeah, thank you. And, we can take it back from, the task force, or at least one member of our task force, that, it's something, we're hearing a possibility to simplify conditions.
I'm curious, when you do implement, I understand this is what EPA wants. You have to have a specific provision or permit. Is that set up so each of the permit engineers knows what to put in each permit, or is it left to the permit engineer to come up with their own language permit by permit? What I've seen is maybe inconsistencies. So if you do have to do something, just to make it consistent and clear, it'd be nice to have something that everyone knows this needs to go in the permit. Here it is, rather than negotiating every time there's a new condition.
So each team, I think the ones, team you're probably most familiar with working with, does have their templates available to the team to build off of. And I think I mentioned there, you start with a standardized and then you build off of it based on what the project is or what the facility circumstances are, the new source review balance where, what the requirements are going to be. But that is what teams do is they build their library. We also have, again, you can search for equipment in our database. Well, it's all subject to public records request, but that's all available to staff too, searchable for, the codes we have in our system. So it's not that it is a new endeavor each and every time staff starts one of these, is they start, from a core requirement or template, if it is, a piece of equipment that has been permitted before.
So is that by experience that once someone puts in a permit, it goes into your database, and the next person who comes along will use the most recent provision?
I would say it's not a singular option. I would say it's probably a bank of different examples of templates. I would say, and then with this, the senior staff in those teams, I would say, probably, not probably, concurs, we discuss on what is appropriate and what should be used on that standard condition.
I was digging into that. I
Yeah.
have seen a situation where someone takes a permit condition that someone else next in line, so you go to permit engineer, no, this is now our policy, but it wasn't vetted. And the person who took the condition in the first place maybe didn't know what they're accepting. So it just creates a lot of time and effort to try to resolve something like that. So if it's something that, hey, this is something the next permit engineer is going to look at, is there a way to, I don't know, supervisor managers looking at that, making sure that that makes sense? Maybe you're doing that already, but just trying to say it'd be nice to have more conformity so we're seeing consistency amongst permits and it's well thought out rather than maybe each permit engineer kind of going in their own direction.
Yeah, I would say if someone's communicating as the policy, there has been a discussion behind that with the manager level supervisors. These go through review. And then, it's a discussion for future projects. Is it appropriate? So again, you start with that standardized, but if it gets to that point, it typically has been vetted out, amongst the teams and the supers and managers. Thank you. But definitely, it's a good feedback. Understand 204, the language is, as you said, nebulous. I think it's built where something isn't in a rule, something more is needed, but understanding guardrails is making sure it doesn't go too far.
Just going back to the purpose of this whole group is streamlining. If there's some way to make it simpler, reproducible, avoid haggling, that's just going to get permits issued faster.
Yeah, but I think it's that self question I mentioned earlier is the why.
Right.
Why is it going in there? Why is it being proposed? And then maybe the next question of that, and what do we hope to accomplish by doing that? Yeah, no, thank you. I think it's all things we can take back to staff as they're going through the first review ultimately, and then you get those questions smoothed out, and then it takes less on the review and the back and forth. I think ultimately it just builds upon itself. So I really appreciate the discussion item. Thank you. Sorry, I haven't been checking our comment, but I don't see our other task force members' hands raised. I know we're coming up on lunchtime. Do we have any public comments? I see none.
I'm behind you.
Let's, all right.
And the comment I have is regarding going back to NSR and with the NSR permit condition on a lot of our permits. And this will require a really lengthy time to go over all the issues. But I just use one example, which is for offset purposes. And offset originally for NSR was based on a daily maximum daily limit And in the early 90s, industry complained about that. So we moved to a monthly limit to make it much easier for people to comply, because people don't always operate at maximum hours. And a lot of our permits, and I can only speak about the permits we have, for an NSR purpose, we have hourly limits, which makes no sense whatsoever. Even new permits that we're receiving today, and we comment on them, saying that this is not appropriate. But the team, they keep insisting that, no, this is what we use for our calculation, and therefore this is your NSR. Which really, if you look at the rule, you look at the staff report and all of that, it's completely not in line with them. And we like a way to address this and resolve this issue. And this appears almost on, I would say, over 90% of our permits, whether it's Title 5 or non-Title 5.
No, thank you. I mean, we're willing to have those discussions. I would say you interchanged multiple concepts in there because you're changing offsets in NSR because NSR is
well because then they will bring in modeling requirement. Okay, but as you know, tagging a condition with the rule, that's the authority of the condition. But if you tag it, let's say in some cases they tag it with modeling, exceeding that limit does not mean I'm violating modeling. So I think there is a lack of understanding from some of the permit writers in terms of what the consequences are of those conditions and really what the rule requires. And this is an issue that we like to address, and because it creates problem for us operationally and maintaining compliance. Our goal is to maintain compliance, but also maintain compliance with the applicable rules, not with something that is not applicable at all in those cases.
We'd love to bring it back for a discussion item in terms of breaking down NSR. We touched it on it. A lot of people thinking probably aren't familiar. It's a complex rule with lots of requirements at the core of it. It's probably the most time-consuming process of breaking it down. And I kind of did on it earlier. What's hourly, what's monthly, discussion. That's great. Yeah, I think so. I'll put the information and bring it back for a task force.
Appreciate that. All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, I will be sure to turn. Any other public comments we have? All right, seeing none. Let's move on to other business. I will be very brief on this. I do have a few things wanted to touch on. We're tentatively scheduled to go to the governing board in October to give an update on the permitting enhancement program. We are working a lot on software and workflow tools, potential working with gas dispensing facilities to streamline and maybe reduce some of the efforts that staff is spending time on those. So you can tentatively put that on the calendar. We are also working on a few guidances and policies in the background. I think one of the first ones we're working on is Rule 3008 facilities. So Rule 317.1 identified a lot of issues with NSR balances and potentially NSR or Title V permitting exempt facilities and maybe handling these through a plan, but basically drawing out specific things that we can, identify these facilities in our database and then make more clear requirements. So we're working on that. We'll have a future working group meeting on that. So I think those have been going through the process. You heard Judy mentioning it here and there, but something we're working on in the background to help smooth things out and make better understanding for the facilities working through these programs. But with that, wanted to open up to a general public comment, if anybody had any comments they wish to add, either task force or the public. Seeing none, no other public comment, no task force discussion.
Can we go back to other? just
Other business?
follow-up
Yes.
items?
Yeah.
One thing I would like to look at, and I don't know if it's appropriate to bring it back to a future meeting, but that's going back to the rules, as we get a lot of complex rules that may benefit from reopening and simplifying it. Would that be useful to bring it back here? What would be efficient?
I think we had one of the discussions. I don't think there's been any resolution or direction on that. So I think it's fair to continue that as another discussion item. I think, I think task force members, welcome to present agenda items if it's maybe a next level.
We had the research permit topic, and we could revisit that, but I know from experience there have been problems getting the research permits. I don't think we got to an endpoint as far as, is there a way to deal with it? We brainstormed of, here's some things that could be done, but it didn't necessarily sound like rulemaking was interested in taking that on. And it's just what I'm saying. Is there a good forum to say, what do we need to do? What would be beneficial to be able to open that up and maybe get the rule open to fix the problem?
That's wondering, if we're able to make progress on it internally. Maybe it's just an update at the next, just a verbal update at the next task force meeting. Or if, there's other discussion that needs to be had, we can add it to the agenda and make sure it's
opening
an ongoing topic.
Ideas on how to address something that I think we all acknowledge is a problem.
Yeah, understood. For those that weren't involved in or attended the previous meeting, it is research permits. It's based on a very aged Rule 441 age rule. Still requires a lot of evaluation with it, but I think it was a task force discussion of it is something that could be updated to facilitate research.
It really does have detrimental impacts upon research. If it takes you 2 years to get a permit, I was involved with certain projects. You threw up your hands like, can't do it. Can't do the research. So that there is a benefit from fixing this, no matter how do we do it.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. I got it down as that and the NSR topic.
Thank you.
As future agenda items, in the coming year, as we can fit them in. All right. I'll pause again. Do we have any other general comments? Do we have discussion? Seeing none, I will adjourn the meeting, but want to thank everybody for attending and participating. It's been very, very valuable. So thank you.